Oh, hi. I just want to do a quick review of this Thrustmaster TCA Sidestick thing. That's this thing right here. You see the picture over there. That's what it's supposed to look like. Mine looks a little different. You might notice these stylish rubber bands there and there. If you look closely, you might notice that there's a couple of hex screws right here. Yeah. And there's no knob here. Yeah. Basically what I got to say about this thing is it's a decent joystick. It's nice. You know, it works. It's nice to use. It's a little stiff, but I can deal with that. It has two major shortcomings which kind of doom it in my eyes. I've had this about 5 years. And the first problem with it, which isn't a huge problem, all the switches and stuff in here, they're Hall effect, except for this one. The one for the Z-axis, that is an old mechanical potentiometer which sits right about here inside the stick. Yeah, which means that the Z action on this thing is not real great. It tends to the potentiometer tends to get gummed up and sticky and does weird things. So I don't like that. Also, if eventually, inevitably, you have to take this thing apart because that potentiometer gets gummed up, starts acting up. I think in this case, at one point, one of the wires connecting that potentiometer broke its connection. I had to take this thing apart and solder it back together to get it working at all. And that leads me to the other major problem with this joystick, which is the quality of this plastic, which is horrible. Basically, if you have to take this thing apart, there's a real good chance you're going to strip out at least one screw on it. I've taken this apart a few times, and these rubber bands are here because all the screws that hold the bottom on are stripped out. These rubber bands are here because this middle screw is stripped out. It's cheap plastic. It can't handle anything. These two screws here are here because this slider switch is a Hall effect switch, and after I had this thing for about 6 months, this switch stopped working correctly. It started doing all erratic stuff, and I found out after taking it apart and looking around at it, I figured out that what's going on is this switch inside of here is held together with a couple of screws that are driven into this plastic. If those screws get loose, the parts come apart and the Hall effect sensor doesn't work right, so you have to tighten the screws. Okay, well, the screws get loose by themselves. You know, just from you sliding this thing up and down a little bit, they come unloose. First time I tried to tighten them, they stripped out right away. This thing never worked right again. That's where these come in. There's a bar of metal underneath of that box that the switch is in. These two screws go through that, and they squeeze the whole thing together, and this switch works that way. There's no room for the little knob, so I had to take that off. But yeah, that's an example of what I've had to do to keep this thing working. What else is broken on it? Yeah, this potentiometer, I've had to fix it a couple times and clean it a couple of times. These screws that hold this thing are about half stripped out. They're still in there, just barely. This trigger right here is mounted on a little pivot, and the pivot, well, there's a little hole in the middle of this piece in the middle of this little trigger piece that fits inside of a plastic spoke, a plastic rod inside of here that it pivots on. That little plastic rod broke, snapped right in half. That's what happened the last time I had to take this thing apart. I had to take it apart. This tiny little piece of plastic bounced out, and it was the end of that spoke, and this trigger just fell out. So I had to chase down a little piece of plastic. I had to crazy glue it back into position. And it took me a couple attempts to get this thing back together to the point where everything was working. That was also when this screw stripped out, when I took it out that time. And that's how come these rubber bands are here now. At this point it works, you know. I like the joystick. I like the way it feels. I like the way it works. The buttons. I like the buttons on it. They're very functional. I managed to use most of them. Good joystick, except that potentiometer is a piece of shit, and this plastic is bullcrap. I paid $60, I think, for this new about 5 years ago. I went out to look for a replacement one, and they're going for like $90, $100, $120. Do not buy this for do not buy this for that kind of money. If you can find a used one, I wouldn't buy that either because I don't know if you could find a used one. If there any one of these things that's more than a few years old, I imagine it's just broken. These, I'm pretty sure, you know. Well, I don't know. Maybe they changed the plastic on the new ones, but if the plastic on the new ones is the same shit this thing's made out of, no, I wouldn't buy this. I wouldn't buy any of these. I don't know if there is a good joystick out there. I've ordered a VKB joystick. They're supposed to be good. That's currently floating its way across the Pacific Ocean somewhere. You know, if Trump doesn't stop it with his fucking tariffs. And I should have that next week sometime, and I'll be able to try that out. But yeah, that's my verdict on this on the Thrustmaster TCA Sidestick Airbus or whatever you call this thing. It's a real nice joystick, but you know, it's not going to last. You know, it's a piece of junk, and for the amount of money they want for it, you know what? I would go get another hobby first. You know. I would just get into, I don't know, I would get into bird watching or masturbation or something. You know, this it's just not worth it. I'm hoping the VKB will be better, but you know, that's all I got for you. Have a good day.